Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Prosperous Overview and Scrutiny Committee for Wednesday the 13th of December, and it's now 2 o'clock, so we'll get started. The first item on the agenda is apologies. Jonathan, I know we have a few.
I have apologies, Chairman, from Philip Hudson, David Smith, Samantha Thompson, Philippa Hayden, Bernard Williams and Hannah Gallimore.
So, 1, 2, 3, 4. We're quorate, just. The second item is declarations of interest. Do any members have any declarations at this moment? No. If you do have any, then as we go through the agenda, please make sure you shout up. Minutes of the meeting held on the 22nd of November 2023. Are we happy that those are a true record? Moved by Graham, seconded by Peter. Thank you. Thank you. And we'll move swiftly on to item 4, which is the Natural Environment Strategy, and this is the report of the Cabinet Member for Environment, Infrastructure and Climate Change, Councillor Simon Tagg.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. Got with me on my right Sarah Bentley, and on my left Catherine Mann. I think we've met both of them before at this committee. We're really pleased to introduce the environment strategy today. We've got a strong commitment in this authority to protecting our environment. We declared the climate emergency in 2019 and also a nature recovery declaration that was supported by everybody on the council in 2022. And these are declarations which recognise the major challenges affecting our environment and the need to act and to continue to act to bring back nature and also protect the nature that we already have. Our draft environment strategy before you today sets out a mission statement and key actions that we will take to deliver our nature recovery declaration and to build that, a block of local nature. It is our response to also new responsibilities that the government have put through the Environment Act onto us and help to contribute towards the global efforts to halt the decline in biodiversity. It's also a building block of the local nature recovery strategy, which members will be aware is a strategy that covers both the county and Stoke-on-Trent, and the county is the accountable body for that. But this strategy is our strategy and will be an important building block that will go along with all of the districts and boroughs and also the city's plans to bring back nature as part of the local nature recovery strategy. Now, the strategy has been developed with the input from officers from across this authority, and we bring it to you today for your input ahead of a consideration by Cabinet in January. So I'd just like to hand over to Sarah, who's going to give a brief presentation on the environment strategy. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So, as Councillor Tagg has set out, our commitment to the natural environment has been articulated through our declarations on climate change and nature recovery made by full council, and in our strategic plan through our priority to tackle climate change, enhance our environment and make Staffordshire more sustainable. The draft strategy has been developed with input from officers across the council. It will be designed in its sort of final version, made available electronically via our website. And it includes case studies that showcase the varied work already being delivered across the council. The draft strategy sets out how we as Staffordshire County Council will deliver our Nature Recovery Declaration. It responds to national targets in Government's 25-year Environment Plan and the refreshed Environmental Improvement Plan. And that includes global commitments around that were made at the UN Nature Summit, COP15. And those are outlined at point 6 in your report. And also the new duties that we have under the Environment Act 2021, which are set out in point 7 of your report. The strategy includes a mission statement, which you can see there, to directly support nature recovery in Staffordshire through targeted action across our land and functions and to act as a champion for activity across the county. The text is provided in Appendix 1 and it gives some context and baseline information for each objective and the key actions that we will take to deliver each of those objectives over the coming years. The actions are brought together in a table at the end of the document with some timeframes associated, and we will be doing a bit more work to develop key performance indicators around those as well. So there's quite a lot of information in all of the documents, and I'm just going to run through the 10 objectives very briefly to give you a feel for what's within the strategy. So the first 2 objectives reflect our delivery of our statutory duties under the Environment Act to develop a local nature recovery strategy, working with our partners, and also to deliver mandatory biodiversity net gain, which comes in January. These will be a major focus of our work over the next few years, and we are required to report on progress under our biodiversity duty. So it's really important that they form part of the strategy. The local nature recovery strategy will, as Councillor Tagg has already outlined, provide a really important framework for nature recovery across Staffordshire and Stoke. And this strategy, our strategy, will be reviewed to make sure we align with it as we progress that. The third objective is about ensuring we take biodiversity into account and reducing risks. So actions include strengthening how we build biodiversity into our decision and plan-making processes, and then a suite of actions, things like going peat-free, reducing pesticides where we can, ensuring good biosecurity measures, and preventing harmful activities and materials being used on our land. So things like balloons and Chinese lanterns and so on. Objectives 4 and 5 reflect the national targets and set out what we will do locally to meet them. We own a significant area of nationally and internationally significant wildlife habitats, notably at Cannock Chase and Chasewater country parks. Currently, 90% of our SSSI land is classed as recovering. So in other words, it is working its way towards favourable condition status. And then we're doing some studies at the moment to understand why the remaining 10% isn't currently doing quite so well. DEFRA have literally just provided guidance on the 30 by 30 target. So this is a really important part of our national and global commitments for biodiversity. And this is around making sure that 30% of our planet is managed and protected for biodiversity by 2030. Based on our sort of current assumptions, we estimate that 29% of our land, excluding highways, could have the potential to count towards that national target. Around 22% would currently meet that from what we can see at the moment, and there's a bit of work for us to do to update surveys and improve management regimes on some of our sites so that that full 29% might qualify. We would then look to increase that to try and deliver our 30% by 2030, but we do feel that that is achievable for Staffordshire County Council. I think the really positive part of that is that this is a global target, about 30% of our planet being managed for biodiversity, and I think it would be really great if 30% of the County Council's land was able to contribute towards that target. Before we go on to the next one, highways are developing their approach to enhancing biodiversity on roadside verges, and that will be a focus for them over the next few years. And we will also continue to undertake targeted work for species on our land and properties. We already have a number of really key projects around things like native crayfish, target bird species, adders and invertebrates that we're doing on our country parks at the moment, and we would look to expand some of that work. And that will very much over the coming years be informed by the local nature recovery strategy. Objective 8 reflects our climate change declaration and the opportunity for nature-based solutions to contribute to that. And Objective 9 focuses on our protected landscapes, including those of national significance. So obviously within Staffordshire, we include parts of the Peak District National Park, Cannock Chase National Landscape and the National Forest. The Levelling Up Act includes strengthened duties for AONBs, or national landscapes, as they're now known, and for national parks. Objective 10 reflects our role in championing community action through awareness raising, supporting community involvement and volunteering. The draft strategy includes actions and milestones to achieve these objectives. As I said at the outset, the strategy will be reviewed in late 2025 and a progress report and refreshed strategy will be produced by January 2026 to comply with the Environment Act requirements. It also enables us to review the strategy in line with the local nature recovery strategy more broadly for the county to make sure that we're aligning with that strategy and doing our bit to deliver it. The LNRS will be delivered by March 2025. So to summarise, Chairman, this draft strategy sets out how we will fulfil our Nature Recovery Declaration and contributes to national and global work to halt the decline of biodiversity. And our recommendation is that the committee considers and provides comments on the draft environment strategy to support its consideration by Cabinet. Thank you.
Thank you both. Any questions, members? Graham?
Thank you, Chair. As we're at the strategy stage at the moment, when will you get on to the recommendation, such as how we're going to get natural corridors for larger animals than invertebrates, so that they can travel from place to place, because foxes can travel quite a distance in an evening. And I'm quite conscious that we see enough dead animals on our highways because they can't cross roads or something like that. So there's a whole infrastructure thing in terms of corridors or highways for animals to move about their different territories. When will that sort of thing come in? Because we're at the strategy, when we'll be getting to more practical things. Thank you.
So some of that is already happening and already built into projects, and in terms of things like highways, we do influence highway designs at the moment, and there are sort of measures in many highway designs put in to support movement of key species and to ensure that protected species have kind of measures in place. So there will very much be a case of sort of building on some of that existing work. The local nature recovery strategy that we're producing, which we are sort of starting work on at the moment and will be delivered by March 2025, is very much about mapping out some of those key opportunity areas where we can connect up habitats. We already have a really good nature recovery map across Staffordshire, which has been developed by the district councils with the Wildlife Trust to support local plan processes. So it will very much be taking that information, prioritising that at a kind of more strategic level. But some of that work is already being used to influence projects and key bits of work going forward.
Good, thank you.
I think also, Chair, just to add to that, as Sarah pointed out, number 10 on those list of things we want to achieve is that raise awareness, involve our communities, I think through parishes, etc., you know, hedgehog routes and tunnels and things, so that under roads and new developments and things. I think through this strategy we can go and project this out there into communities, and I think both in urban and rural areas there are people that want to get involved in these type of projects, so I think this will be a route for them to do that, and there's a big communications point on this and a communication with communities and getting them involved. Thank you.
Charlotte?
Thank you, Chair. You've touched, right, let me start first by talking about your wildlife-friendly management approach to verges. It was just a couple of years ago when I raised this in full council and was told in no uncertain terms that the verges are cut 6 times a year, and my suggestion of a strip, you know, maybe 1 metre wide to allow for visibility and the rest to be left to be fairly wild was sort of dismissed as ridiculous. So I wondered how you're going to be approaching this. I mean, I go to France a lot, and I have to say the verges there are full of wildflowers. Some are better than others, but it looks fantastic, and it doesn't seem to cause any problems. So that's the first question. And the second question is, I'm glad to see that you're wanting to raise awareness and support active involvement of communities. How exactly are you planning to do that? Because I would hope that you would involve some groups like Moorlands Climate Action and other community groups. Because I have to say that I don't think in the past the County Council has been very good at reaching out to either district, parish, town councils or indeed to communities. It seems to be more of a statement that that's happening rather than active involvement in ensuring that that's delivered. So I'll be interested to know what your approach is.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Atkins. Yeah, I think on the first point, I think in a couple of years we've probably come a long way, haven't we, on how we approach the management of our land, and that we're seeing that in the country park. We're seeing where we leave grass to grow long during no-mow May, which was never done before. That can help habitats and help species. I think on the highway, there's always that consideration of safety, which has always been something which I know that David Williams has been concerned about. But I think as we move forward, we want tidy grass verges where we need them, but also, as you say, further back, we can leave them longer, plant wildflowers, and some of the plans that David will be bringing forward in that area, I think, is going to meet that objective which you talk about. On the issue with involvement with communities, I think we are having a community strategy, and this paper doesn't just sit in my portfolio, and this strategy fits within the community's, Victoria Wilson as well, and as part of her community strategy, that's central to that. We'll be pushing out the messages around this. I think we do, the last couple of years particularly, we have engaged with people like Moreland's Climate Matters Staffordshire, the Globe Foundation, the conference that they had at Keele University, and before that at Uttoxeter. We've played a bigger part in that, and that's what I want to see us to do more of. I think through this strategy we can do that, and as it says there under 10, as we said earlier, that raising awareness, involvement of community is key to this. And I think unless you want to say anything more how we can do that in more detail, Sarah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a number of examples. So that would sort of span into volunteering work on country parks, for example, and getting the community sort of more involved. We already have some projects through our libraries which are delivering nature and sort of climate-focused activities. We also work a lot through partnerships, so it's not always the county council itself doing things, but it's about us contributing to projects. So things like the Transforming the Trent Valley project, which has had a huge focus on community engagement and really working that forward, and we've been very much sort of part of that project, working with the Wildlife Trust and other partners. So sometimes I think it's about us delivering things through partnership initiatives as well. The local nature recovery strategy will also have a really big focus on engagement and setting out how communities can get involved in delivering changes, and that will be a really big focus for that project as well.
Thank you.
Reverend Michael.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I thank the team for the work that they're doing here and for their report and welcome that, because this is part of the future and the healthy living for all of us. I was going to ask a question that the councillor asked at the beginning about corridors and linking up of wildlife areas, but I just want to seize on a detail, if I may, which is a question of presentation. The images that you've used here are all birds, I think. And while I can recognise a barn owl and the curlew at the beginning and can relate to these to some extent as being within Staffordshire, the great white egret there, I mean, it's a new arrival, so I just don't know how it came to be inserted and how it can. I mean, I would have thought you might want to use a mammal as well as among the images that you're using as part of the presentation. There's a great white egret on Doxy Marshes occasionally, but it's not a native to Staffordshire at the moment.
Like one. I think a valid point is you'll see the actual strategy we've got in the agenda is just basically a Word document at the moment, and the idea is, and we'll take that on board, I think I'd love to see a hedgehog or two on there, which I was talking about with Councillor Hutton, is that we will have the strategy will have that breadth of species and that, and I think you've just, Sarah, you can explain why you've got them in the order you have on your presentation. What did I say? No? Okay.
All I would say, Councillor, is it's an absolutely valid point, and we will make sure there's a more diverse range of species in the strategy. This was very much a presentation that I pulled together in haste, and I'm a bird watcher, so that's probably why. But little egrets are quite common in Staffordshire now, so they are expanding. It's a little egret, yeah.
Thanks for your observations, Reverend Michael. You always make me smile. For me, this sounds like there's going to be a cross-working with many cabinet members. And I hope that does happen, because there's nothing worse than being told that that grass verge is going to be wildlife left, and then all of a sudden a mower comes along. So I'm hoping that yourself and David Williams and other cabinet members are going to be talking to each other, because there's been a lack of that, I think, over time, where the left arm doesn't know what the right arm's doing. So it sounds good, and now I want to see it in action, that you're all working together and you're all talking to each other to say, this is what we're doing. We're involving the communities. We're making sure that ward councillors and county councillors know what's going on, and then we can get the messages out as well when people come to us and say, well, it's June and it's still not mown. So, you know, let's talk to each other, I think, is what I'm trying to get to.
I think it's a valid point, and I experienced that as a divisional member up in Newcastle. I think we also have, we work very closely with our districts and boroughs on grass cutting, because, as you know, there's the highway verge, but behind the highway verge may be, you know, borough council land or district council land. Then you may have a housing association. So I think what David's trying to do in his plan, I think probably something will probably come to this committee, probably relevant for this committee in the future on how he plans to do this, is that we all work together and have the same policy, particularly when it comes to No Mow May, for example. You know, the community every year get more behind No Mow May, and they want to know what we are doing, and they, not all the time does that land belong to the county council as highways, or is it the district, or is it a private landowner or a social landlord? So I think that coordination as well needs to take place between all the different authorities that manage land across the county.
Brilliant. Any further questions or comments for the Cabinet members? Okay, so we've just got the one recommendation this afternoon, and that is to consider and provide comments on the draft natural environment strategy to support its consideration by Cabinet. So thank you for everybody's comments. It is what it is. Sarah has just been thrown under the bus, so she will sort out the pictures. And it's a really, really good news story and a good one to be taken forward. So thank you very much. Thank you for your time this afternoon. And we'll move straight on to item 5. Philip, are you okay up there, or do you want to come and move around the side? Because I feel like you're a million miles away.
Well, it's entirely up to you. I'm happy here.
Come
unless
and
you
move round
prefer
the
me.
side.
Do you want me nearer?
Come and move closer.
I feel really embraced.
There's mince pies and sweets this end. No, Jonathan. You're quite happy. We're quite happy to have yours after. He's been a bit cheeky today, isn't he? Yeah. So, item 5 is the Staffordshire County Council's Economic Strategy Delivery Update. Councillor Philip White.
Thank you very much, Chairman. So, pleasure to see you all. I'll try and run through the introduction at a pace so that we've got plenty of time for questions. So this is the 6-monthly report back to the committee on the delivery of the economic strategy, which, as you all know, is now complemented by not only the rural economic strategy but also the employability and skills strategy that you scrutinised in its draft form in September, but is now an adopted strategy. So the broader picture in which the Staffordshire economy operates, both from a global and a national perspective, has continued to develop in a similar way to what we described when we were here 6 months ago. So inflationary pressures continue to be a considerable driver, with the knock-on effect in terms of cost of living. It's pleasing to see that inflation is dropping, and that will be of benefit to people in Staffordshire, as it will be to people in other places as well. The unemployment figures in Staffordshire remain pleasingly well below the national average, so they're running at 2.8% based on figures published yesterday, which is versus 3.8% nationally, but 4.9% regionally in the West Midlands. So Staffordshire remains a place where it is relatively easy to find employment and remain in employment compared to other parts of the country. That's a long-term position, as we know. Within that as well, I think it's particularly important to note that disposable income per head in Staffordshire, according to the latest figures, which have also been published since we last met, are increasing at 4.4% in Staffordshire compared to 4% for the West Midlands region and 3.7% across the UK respectively. And I think that's a really important figure in terms of our productivity and most importantly, the productivity that sees its way into the pay packets of people working in Staffordshire. Clearly, that has to be considered in the context of inflation, but nonetheless, that's very welcome. It's something we'll be closely monitoring as a trend, because that is one of the big picture objectives that we have. It's making sure that people are more productive and that they have more disposable income. So that's very pleasing to see. In terms of our economic strategy, I'll just quickly run through the key priorities within that and highlight one or two things from the broader report that I think are particularly pertinent. So the first priority is town centre and high street regeneration. Now, in that sphere, we've continued to see the changing, the effect of the changing high street here in Staffordshire. So colleagues will have noticed the closure of some prominent businesses, most prominent of all being Wilko, where we've seen Wilko stores change hands and in some cases close down around the county. We've also seen the relocation of Amazon from their site in Rugeley. We've worked very closely with our colleagues, both locally and nationally, in terms of delivering services to people who are impacted by those changes, particularly through our Jobs and Careers service and our careers brokerage service, which we launched this year. Regarding that, I'm pleased to say that the number of vacancies in Staffordshire still outstrips the number of people who are looking for work. So we have more than one vacancy per job seeker available in the county. There is that challenge there in terms of matching those people up and making sure that they also have the skills that they require, which is where our employment brokerage service is particularly important. But regarding the high street, the investment in regeneration continues, and the County Council's role in supporting that across the various Future High Streets Fund, Town Deal and LUF projects around the county continues to be one of our key activities, led by Mr Hodge, who's with us today. And I'm pleased to say that the announcements of investment continue. So a couple of weeks ago, we were pleased to welcome the Secretary of State for Levelling Up to Stafford so that he could announce a £20 million investment in the railway station gateway area here in Stafford. So considerable new housing and employment land through the third round of Levelling Up funds. So our success in terms of attracting investment into the regeneration of our town centres and playing our role in the delivery of that, whilst also playing our role in sustaining employment and helping people to move between jobs continues within that area. Within the higher skilled, higher paid workforce priority, I've already mentioned the disposable income figures, but a few other things that I'll highlight are the continued success of the skills-related activities within the county. So the opening of the Institute of Technology at Stafford College, which, although it's hosted by Stafford College, is a team effort, particularly working with Keele University, Burton and South Derbyshire College, and other providers around the county. We've also seen the construction of the West Midlands interchange development commence, although that is a development that people locally will see the impact of in terms of the construction. The jobs impact is going to be considerable, and we're working there with a dedicated employment brokerage service that's been funded through the Section 106 monies from that development, which we secured. So we're working directly there to secure jobs and training for people to work at the interchange. I've mentioned our employment brokerage scheme again, so I won't seek to go over that ground again, but the other very pleasing bit of news was that our community learning service received an extremely strong good Ofsted inspection outcome as well. So the adult education service has been independently verified as being of a very high standard. Moving on and continuing to try and go at a pace, within our supporting startups and step-up businesses priority, we're continuing to develop high-quality business support, particularly through our enterprise centres, and I'm pleased to see that the Shire Hall Business Centre is now 85% occupied following its opening earlier this year. We've supported just shy of 600 individuals through our Staffordshire Startup Mentoring Programme, and 279 of the people who've completed the course are now in self-employment, and we're extremely happy with that. We're also supporting nearly 200 business owners whose businesses have been trading for up to 5 years in terms of step-up support, and that support in areas such as marketing, accountancy, digital skills, and human resources consultancy. So that is very much getting into gear. Within the innovation sphere, and this, you will remember, is the area that we debated here when we were developing the strategy. Should innovation be a separate strand within the strategy or not? I'm very pleased that we did decide to make it one of those, and we are seeing our innovation collaboration within the county develop, and a couple of things I'd highlight there in particular are the increasing prominence of the A50, A500 corridor, which, as you all know, is particularly an energy innovation corridor with hydrogen manufacturers and research along that corridor. I was pleased that that was recognised by the government in terms of their recent Network North announcement, where one of the key highways investments is on the A50, A500, which appertains to the offer that we're putting to government in terms of what economic opportunities there are on that corridor. In a similar vein, we are now working closely with Cadent on their Hydrogen Valley programme, which is about the acceleration of the rollout of hydrogen infrastructure in the Midlands, and Staffordshire is now an integral part of their thinking in terms of that. And we're also working in close collaboration with Keele University, both further developing our science and innovation part, which we've been working with them on for some years. But I'm pleased to say that we've recently also secured some joint funding from an external competitive process to develop that collaboration further, particularly in terms of innovation in green technologies. And regarding the development of investment-ready projects, I think we've talked about quite a lot of that already in terms of the various strands of investment, but I'd particularly highlight the upgrade of the A38 Branston interchange, which was the largest part of our Levelling Up Fund bid, which was successful in round 2, which will be starting delivery in the new year. And the Chatterley Valley West employment site in Newcastle-under-Lyme, which is 43 hectares and will generate around 1,700 jobs, which, although we had a slight hiatus because one of the contractors on the site went bust, is well on its way to delivery and will be delivered during the course of next year, along with Harworth Group, our private sector partner there, and Newcastle-under-Lyme Borough Council as well, who've been an excellent partner in that process. And then finally, so that I can take a breath, regarding strategic corridors, we're particularly pleased with that success with regard to investment in the A50, A500. That is one of, I think I'm right in saying, 8 major road network schemes around the country that have been successful through Network North. So we think that is a particularly strong evidence of our strategic corridor work succeeding. We want to achieve the same on the A38 in particular, but also the A5, and continuing the investment on the A34, which is the other strand of the Levelling Up Fund monies that we've received that's delivered improvements in Cannock and in Stafford, work that's ongoing through the next 12 months. And with all of that, I'll take a breath, I think.
Thanks, Philip. At the end of paragraph 15, it says by 2030, which is literally 7 years away. It's not a million miles. We're going to address the low levels of skills across some parts of the county. It'd be interesting to know where they are, to see if we can have any input into what's going on. Not house by house, but division or ward or even just an area. So we can see if there's any input that we can give to get in those people, to encourage those people to do something, or to upskill is the phrase, I suppose.
We can certainly provide that data because we have it. I mean, in broad terms, the lower skill levels tend to follow the areas of higher deprivation. So that's areas of Tamworth, Cannock, Burton-upon-Trent, Newcastle-under-Lyme in particular, but there are also rural areas where there are pockets of the same issues in particular. So yes, we can certainly provide that information so that you can drill into it. It might be, if I dare suggest it, something when we bring back the skills and employability and skills strategy for its first look, which will be coming up before the next round of this. So we could maybe dive into it then, if you were minded to.
Go on then, Graham.
Thank you. Philip, does the Multiply programme map to the skills deprivation programme geographically? So are the people that are coming on to Multiply that we seem to be having some slight success with, are they from the same areas as you've just mentioned? Thank you.
Yes, so another one that we can pick up when we look at the employability and skills strategy. But yes, in terms of our priority areas, the areas where I suppose, for want of a better term, we've been marketing Multiply in particular. Yes, we have been looking at those deprivation areas and also at population sections as well, where there are reasons to believe that there's a greater level of need. So yes, that's absolutely part of the programme. It's part of the requirements of the programme in terms of how it's been designed nationally. But we've been using the extensive data set that we have on that to target that. And we'd be extremely happy to discuss that further at a later date.
Charlotte?
Thank you. Just a couple of things. I think the sort of problems we meet in places like Leek is with small businesses that are expanding can't find appropriate accommodation to move into. You know, there is no big business park. And so they're successful, but they're being held back by the fact that they can't find appropriate accommodation at the right price. And so that's one issue. The other issue is that I very much support the work that's been done on low-level skills. But obviously, with the cost of living crisis and everything else, and because probably the impact of what happened during COVID, is that many young people are perhaps reluctant to go to university. So what are we doing to encourage local businesses that are promoting up to degree level apprenticeships for young people to get that qualification via working rather than going to university for whether it be 2 or 3 years? Because it seemed to me that a lot of young people may be aware of that, but some may not be aware of it until they get to the appropriate firm who might offer that. So it's about raising aspirations, which has always been an issue, I think, in Staffordshire, raising aspirations, but recognising that actually young people don't have to go into massive debt to get a degree level qualification if that is what they're minded to do. I was surprised, to be honest, that we had a recent McDonald's open up in Leek, and actually they provide at the top level a degree level qualification via an apprenticeship. And if they can do it, I'm sure that there are lots of other firms that can do it too.
Thank you for those. I mean, the McDonald's University was an eye-opener to me when I heard about it a while ago. But I mean, it goes to show that your prejudices can be wrong, doesn't it? And McDonald's.
I should say it's in my district board, so I'm not at all prejudiced against it. I met the owner; it's fine, no problem.
It's my prejudice, not yours. But regarding the first question around enterprise space for startups, and one of the things that I'm very aware of is that
startups, but follow on.
Startups and step-ups. We don't have any enterprise centres as a county council within Staffordshire Moorlands, and it's a discussion that we've been having with officers at the district council for about a year now to look at how jointly we can look at delivering that. And I think there are several locations where that might be of benefit. So Leek, Biddulph, Cheadle immediately spring to mind. I know that the district council has been considering, you may have a better handle on this than me, but whether there's some space perhaps within their offices that might be useful for that, or another location entirely. But it's something I'd be really keen to do, because I know that there is a gap in the market there, and when the private sector isn't filling that gap, but there is a demand, then that's where the local authority should be looking to step in. So I absolutely agree with that, and anywhere else where there is a gap. I mean, actually in Burton, where I live, we have some enterprise centre space, but we don't have enough. And so we see a similar issue, and as a small business owner locally there, I'd love to have some enterprise space I could use, and I can't find anything that fits. So it is an issue that we are working on and is important. Regarding skills levels, particularly the take of apprenticeships and degree level apprenticeships, yes, this is something that we work very hard to promote. We've got a report coming to Cabinet in February around the apprenticeship levy, which is obviously the government's preferred vehicle for encouraging employers to take on more apprentices, which, as we know, has some challenges with it because it doesn't provide wage support, it only provides funding for training. But the other two things that I'd highlight are our jobs brokerage service, which we've created in order to very much target a gap, as we saw it, in terms of matching up people who are looking for jobs with skills packages, which we rolled out for GCSE and A-level results day this year. So very much targeting people at that stage in their lives. But the other thing that's a priority within the employability and skills strategy is careers advice and guidance, which is one of those Cinderella subjects, isn't it? Which I'm determined that we do grasp really strongly here in Staffordshire. And I think with the demise of the local enterprise partnership, there's a real opportunity for the county council to step into that space more firmly and to play more of a role in that. And you're absolutely right. Helping young people to understand what their real options are is incredibly important, because often perception doesn't actually match the reality of what you can do and how accessible it is. And I think the accessibility is the key, particularly for people who perhaps come from backgrounds where there aren't other people who've been down those paths before. So it's something that's very important. But I will say a work in progress rather than one where I feel like we're delivering as much as we could do right now. So it's an important point to raise.
I'm sure the District Council will be very amenable.
Any further questions? Oh, Graham.
Thank you. You've mentioned hydrogen, and I'm quite pleased that some neighbouring countries like France are going to really push forward with hydrogen, having just discovered a rather large amount of it in France. But what other areas are we targeting? So much of what is in this strategy is things to help any business rather than such as upskilling people. It helps a whole range of business. But are we targeting things for the future, such as production of house batteries, recycling of photoelectric cells? There's so many things that will be coming out that we'll need in the future, and I don't see anything like that specifically targeted. Is there any way we can actually say, hey companies, come here, we're going to really look after you because we want a whole cluster? I'm sure, I know you're well aware of cluster, and that's what you're trying to encourage on the A50, is this cluster technique where lots of companies come together with a similar theme. So are we doing anything on other than hydrogen? Thank you.
So what you've identified there in the strategy is a very deliberate choice, which is that we're not seeking to pick winners in Staffordshire in terms of predicting which areas of the economy may grow in the future beyond what the evidence can show us today. So if I use hydrogen innovation and manufacturing along the A50 500 corridor, that is already happening. So from Keele University, where they have the high deploy energy demonstrator putting hydrogen into the gas grid, through JCB with their hydrogen engine manufacturing, you're going into backhoes and other vehicles as we speak, and then further on into Derbyshire with Toyota selling hydrogen saloons, Rolls-Royce developing hydrogen engines, and Alstom selling hydrogen trains. It's already happening, and what we're doing there is saying this is already happening. It's already going to be quite large, but it could be considerably larger with a little bit of public sector involvement in the right places, whether that's investment or whether it's clearing obstacles out of the way. And what we want to do is to have an environment where those sort of innovative businesses can come through easily and access the support they want, and that the public estate is responsive to those. And I'm very mindful, just to give an example of where I think that might have gone a little bit awry, in the northwest, where graphene was considered to be the thing, and there was an awful lot of effort ploughed into that, and it hasn't actually generated a great deal of return. Who knows what other things may have been missed in the process? So we want to be responsive and provide support in an appropriate way, but I think there's a risk in picking winners. Hopefully we've got the balance right, but we will always keep that under review, and if our approach proves not to be the best one, then we would look to change it.
Thank you.
Tony, is there anything you want to add? No, nothing. Oh, wow. Okay. If there are no further questions or comments, then members, we've got 3 recommendations. That we consider the update on progress made in the delivery of the County Council's economic strategy since its consideration by the committee in June of this year. We consider the interventions already made by the County Council and partner organisations, and recommends further interventions to be considered by Cabinet that the committee believe would help to enable the successful delivery of the strategy, and invite the Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member for Economy and Skills to bring an update on delivery of the strategy to this committee for scrutiny in 6 months' time. Are members in agreement that that's what we do for, we invite Councillor White back if we must? Yeah, so we'll look for, I'm sure you'll be with us before then, Philip.
I certainly hope so. I think I will be, but I'll be seeing you all in full council tomorrow. For those who aren't councillors, I'll wish you a happy Christmas today, in case I don't see you another time. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Philip. Are you ready, Jonathan?
Thank you, Chair.
Item 6, reviews of school performance. Councillor Jonathan Price.
Thank you again, Chair. So, yeah, I have Tim Moss with me, and I'm sure we've all met Tim before. We've brought several papers here. So today we're going to talk about the progress of educational achievement in Staffordshire with Staffordshire schools. So I am pleased to be here this afternoon with the opportunity to review the performance of Staffordshire state-funded schools, and that includes both local authority maintained schools and academies for the academic year 21 to 2022. So I'm pleased for 2 reasons. The first is probably the most important, because this was the first school year where there was no direct impact of the pandemic on our educational provision, and the reintroduction of the more normal routine assessments and exams. This isn't to say, of course, that schools and their pupils and students are no longer affected by the pandemic. Far from it, of course. But we're here today to share the performance outcomes, and secondly, of course, it provides an opportunity to celebrate the improvements in the proportion of schools and academies judged as good or outstanding in Staffordshire. When the report was drafted, the latest Ofsted published information was as of the 31st of October. And I thought it would be helpful to set this into some context. So in October 2013, 65% of all Staffordshire schools and academies were judged as good or outstanding, which means the proportion in Staffordshire has increased by 14 percentage points since October 2013 compared to 10 percentage points nationally. So in October 2018, 84% of Staffordshire schools and academies were good or outstanding, compared to 86% nationally. But during the same period, the percentage of inadequate schools has reduced by 4 percentage points, or 16 schools in Staffordshire, compared with 1 percentage point nationally, which shows the work that's being done. This is the first time Staffordshire has been in line with the national average, and I'm hopeful with some inspection reports yet to be published, we should find ourselves slightly above national. Looking at the performance across the county, the report sets out how Staffordshire compares to the national averages. And as been discussed previously in this forum, Staffordshire head teachers and school governors and academy trusts are responsible for the performance of their schools and academies. And as a local authority, we take a strategic overview of the performance and work with the Department for Education's regional director where there are schools of concern. So I trust that everybody has obviously read the report, and both Tim and I will be happy to discuss any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Charlotte.
First of all, it's a bit worrying that the maths and writing is still, the levels are still below pre-COVID levels. And it's particularly worrying because I think all the evidence shows that those people in the most deprived areas are the most likely to have faltered during the COVID pandemic. And I'm not clear, although I think I have asked about this in the past, how much the tutoring service has really helped lift the performance of those pupils who particularly were damaged during COVID. And I fear that cohort, or several cohorts, will go on and continue to suffer that disadvantage in years to come. Obviously there was a terrible situation for university students, but I think the worst impact has been for the sort of years 5, 6, 7, 8 who have been badly impacted. And the second question, of course, inevitably, will be about Leek High, because although you give a very glowing picture of what's happening in the county as a whole, if you happen to have a pupil at Leek High, that's 100% failure, as opposed to looking at what's happening over the county. Obviously, it's still in special measures, and from what I can tell, very little is moving in the right direction there. I mean, clearly, Leek is too small a place to really be able to sustain 2 high schools, even with the middle school system. And clearly what is really needed is 1 new school, which could bring together both pupils from the rural areas and pupils from Leek. But clearly there isn't the capital funding to do that. I mean, we've got Westwood that is struggling very badly with its lovely but ancient buildings. And then you've got Leek High that also has problems with its much newer buildings. So there is obviously a need there, and I don't know what you are thinking about the way forward, because clearly at the moment the pupils at Leek High in various ways are being failed.
No, I appreciate the question, Councillor Atkins. Actually, Leek High is very much in my mind at the moment. Particularly, I read the report a couple of days ago, and I think Tim and I were talking about Leek High today at our one-to-one as well. So I'm aware of the complicated picture out there at the moment. It's not just about the 1 school. I think it's about the 2, isn't it? And the impact that's being had. And I know that we've met before. I wondered if it'd be useful for us to get together again outside this room, and potentially as well. I think it wouldn't do any harm to go and visit the school, and I'd like to go with you if that's okay. So if we could sort something out around that, I will pass the buck on the reading around maths and tutoring and on to Tim.
Thank you, Jonathan. And you're right, Charlotte. In terms of the particular challenges at the end of Key Stage 2, the report indicates which is a national challenge. So Staffordshire, again, compares favourably to the national picture when you look at where youngsters are at the end of Key Stage 2. However, you're quite right to say that they are still kind of below those pre-pandemic levels. And I think as Councillor Price referenced right at the very beginning, it's the first year where we've seen the more normal routine assessments and exams take place. However, I think we all recognise the particular challenges that are faced and schools continue to face. and to some extent it's broader than probably the writing and the maths. That's probably where it's demonstrated in terms of the particular challenges, but there are broader issues that we know there are more youngsters who are absent from school. Again, Staffordshire compares favourably in terms of absence and when you look at the attendance at schools. However, all of that combines to provide a particular picture. And for us, it's about how we're encouraging schools to work together to support each other, and particularly one of the benefits that we have currently working and operating across Staffordshire is the way in which the teaching school hubs work with each other, and again are focusing in on particular priorities. So there is a focus around mathematics and the maths hub, which is based in the Paisley teaching school hub, again working across Staffordshire, and similarly that focus around, whilst reading looks okay, it's about making sure that youngsters have those reading skills in order to develop their writing skills, and then using those reading skills to support their writing. And again, how the teaching school hubs are working with that across all of the schools. And there is some further work around a national professional qualification to support the development of English. Again, that's not unique to Staffordshire, that's a national programme as well.
Well, it's good to hear that there is cooperation across schools, because certainly in the pre-academy world, I remember as Chair of Governors allowing my head teacher to be seconded to another school for half the week to lead that school into better performance. And, you know, that was incredibly helpful both to the school but also to him in terms of the challenges he was facing. But it does worry me that with academy schools, you know, they are in competition pretty much. And one of those competitive elements sometimes is that they're reluctant to take on special needs pupils. And I'm not going to name the school, but you know which one I'm talking about, within Leek, that actively discourages special needs pupils from staying in the school if they're already there. And I think that is very worrying. I know that obviously the district hubs can help with that, but it is very worrying because it means then that the county ends up picking up the bill for a pupil going into a private school sometimes, which is plainly ridiculous, particularly when we look at the overspend in SEND, both in terms of SEND itself and the high needs block, but also, of course, SEND transport.
You raise a really, really good point as well, and that's some of the work that we're doing around the CDIS model and the enhanced plan, do, review model too, which means that schools will have to clearly demonstrate that they can support or not support a child. And there will be significant challenge both from the local authority and hopefully their peer schools as well. We know who the schools are that aren't inclusive, and we've had this conversation in this room previously, particularly on the CDIS paper and the APDR, but also about inclusion. It's getting better, but there are still those MATs out there that are performance driven, more so than perhaps they are about keeping those more challenging pupils or those who've got additional needs, which actually should be supported in mainstream. And I know you're an advocate for SEND and for mainstream support where needed as well. And as I've said, I've got a child in mainstream school that's a SEND pupil, absolutely thriving. But some schools fear that it will affect their overall results if they have those children that require more additional support. And that's not how it should be, and that's not how we want to be inclusive within the county. And officers and Tim and Lucy are working very, very hard to make sure we've got a model in place where these schools will be held to account and will have to take these children because it's the right thing to do for our children at the end of the day.
Reverend Michael, did you want to ask a question?
If I may. Thank you, Chair. Afternoon, both. I picked up this before. I'm looking at the performance picture, comparing Key Stage 1 early years with what happens at Key Stage 4, when the overall results in Staffordshire early on are borderline top quartile, second quartile, but by the time they leave secondary school or come to the school leaving age, they've dropped down to the third quartile, C quartile. This is a picture that seems to have prevailed for some years now, and I just wonder if there's been any drilling down to explore how this pattern arrives, and whether there are any kind of lessons that can be picked up from it. I'd be interested to know, for instance, I mean, every kind of statistic like this is a spectrum of spectrums, isn't it? So that it's the average performance across the county compared with other average performances across other areas of authority areas. Is our profile such that we find that there are some people who drop a long way down the performance while others manage to keep up? Or is it that the whole kind of centre of the spectrum gradually drops down over against other spectrums in other authorities? Is there a difference between how pupils perform within the academy network over against the county schools network, which is, I think, one of the rationales of the academisation programme was to improve performance all round. But it'd be useful to know exactly what are the drivers here, what's the sort of detailed picture, and how we can address the way in which, I mean, obviously people are developing in their education, they're not just sort of standing still, but the progress being made from a good start of Staffordshire pupils is much less than it ought to be, in theory, compared with the progress that other pupils are making.
It's a really good question, and it's a challenging question, because to some extent there is no pattern. That what if we had all of youngsters performing as the best youngsters perform, then we would be clearly in the top quartile still. But actually there is no pattern away in terms of the way where that performance drops off. It's not necessarily linked to areas of significant deprivation. That sometimes that you can pick up on the progress that those youngsters are making far outstretches the progress that youngsters are making elsewhere. And sometimes it's where the attainment is better. There is no one, you can't say that there is one particular aspect to it. The academy versus local authority maintained schools perspective, it's a moot point now, given the fact that virtually all of our secondary schools are now academies. We're left with a handful of secondary schools. So comparing the two is no longer comparing like with like. And I haven't got that information in front of me, but I would suspect that actually the academy performance is slightly better than the maintained school performance, given the profile of the schools that have converted. Yeah, it is exactly those same particular issues again. The challenge is around how we ensure that, again, we use the best to work with the best. And part of the models and the conversations that we have with the regional director from the regions group is about how we utilise that to support what's happening across the county. There is differences within the 2-tier and 3-tier systems. So at the end of Key Stage 2, the 3-tier system doesn't perform as well as the 2-tier system. However, by the time you get to Key Stage 4, the 3-tier system performs better than the 2-tier system. So you've got all of those kinds of differences that you can't, as I say, you can't put a finger on a particular thing, but it is a challenge.
Any further questions? Oh, sorry, Graham.
Tim, on secondary schools, do they still reflect the geographical area that they come from. So I know one particular quite large multi-academy trust has got a school near where I live and another school just outside my division. One is exceptional and the other one is, well, I think it might have got up to good, but that's probably the best it's ever going to get and often requires. So, but one's in a really semi-rural, quite well-off area, and the other one's in an area which attracts a lot of children who we might argue come from deprived areas. Would you find that pattern is still the same right across the county?
I think if you looked at it quite at a high level, I think what you would see is where we have higher levels of deprivation, then you might see lower achievement or attainment, sorry, not achievement, a lower attainment in terms of those, the English Baccalaureate entries and the English Baccalaureate results. What you wouldn't see necessarily though is higher progress and achievement. And so the rates of progress in some of those areas would be higher in those areas where there is greater deprivation. So in that sense, it's about how you're looking at it, but that's not a consistent picture. So as you come down in terms of looking at it, you would see that there are schools that are in areas of deprivation actually do really well in terms of attainment, and similarly, schools where there is less deprivation don't particularly do very well with attainment. So
incredibly mixed.
Yeah, I've been fortunate enough since having the portfolio to have got round a fair few schools, and it is a really, really mixed bag. I think in some of the more deprived areas, they find themselves a slightly larger SEND cohort sometimes, but they do so well with those children to help them, and as Tim said, to raise that the attainment from a low base to much better improvements. They get reputations for being those schools that do better with these children, and what you find is other schools, particularly some high schools, will suggest, you know, that school's the best place to send your child, and you end up with a lot more SEND children in those schools, whereas some other schools in more affluent areas may not necessarily be as keen to take on some of these SEND children. I have to be careful what I say, because I'll get schools starting to pick me up on this, and I know that we've got some very good inclusive schools in very, very good areas. So I see a really strange mixed pattern across the county. But if I could as well, as we're drawing to a close, Chair, I wondered as well if I could just thank our schools, particularly because this is a public meeting, and our special schools. And I hope that the teachers and the staff who work incredibly hard get an opportunity to have a bit of a rest over Christmas, and those parents as well, particularly those parents with SEND children, because I know how difficult sometimes that can be over the Christmas period. So I just wanted to wish everybody, particularly our schools and staff, a happy Christmas.
Well said, Jonathan. They do work incredibly hard, and also thank you to you and your teams of people that are out there doing the work as well, Tim and your team. So if you could pass that on as well, that would be fantastic. Any further comments or questions for Jonathan? No? Thank you, gentlemen, for your time this afternoon. We will see you tomorrow, Jonathan, and Tim, if we don't see you, a very Merry Christmas.
Yeah, see you all tomorrow, and those who aren't here, as Philip said earlier, I hope you have a very happy Christmas.
So we'll move swiftly on to the work programme. I'll just get to the right. The work programme is many, many pages now. Yes, it appears that way, doesn't it? So, where are we? So, the date of the next meeting, according to my work programme, is Thursday the 11th of January at 2 o'clock. Afternoon meetings. And we've got the local transport plan 4. We've got lighting for Staffordshire, and we'll talk about the contract with Eon. And then we've got the highways transformation progress plan. So yes, it's the David Williams show in January. No, it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Yeah. Anything further to add, Jonathan? He has, look, he's there.
Just got the one item to report that's been requested to be withdrawn from the February meeting, Chairman. Don't know whether you wanted to report that or whether you wanted me to mention it.
That's the air quality action one, yeah. Yeah, that's one's been, the item number 2 for the February meeting has been pulled because it's not ready yet, so we need to wait for it to be ready. Reverend Michael, are you okay?
Yeah, could I request, as in previous years, Chair, that the annual report of the SACRE, the Standing Advisory Council for Religious Education, be received by this Scrutiny Committee at a suitable point. It has been created and it's been issued to schools. So, thank you.
Okay, as soon as we get a copy, we'll try and put it in somewhere.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that's the work programme. If there's nothing further to add, I thank you for your attendance this afternoon and close the meeting at 3:10. Thank you very much. Oh, and thank you to Jonathan, our scrutiny officer over there that scribbles away throughout the whole of the meetings, for your commitment and your support throughout the year. I know we've got a few more months to go, but we're at the end of this year for now. Thank you very much, everyone.